A world where private jets are like taxis, mansions are the standard family home, and the family business isn't a local shop. It's a global empire worth billions. This is the world of Filipino wealth in America, a world most of us can only dream of. But here's what you might not know. That world has quietly arrived in Detroit. For over a century, Motor City has been defined by names like Ford, Chrysler, and Fisher, the automotive dynasties that built empires on assembly lines and American steel. But beneath the surface of this industrial titan, something remarkable is happening. Filipino capital is seeping into Detroit's DNA, transforming everything from its hospital corridors to its semiconductor supply chains, from its restaurant scene to its nursing stations. These aren't just immigrants working jobs. These are heirs to billion-dollar empires. Tech titans whose apps are on every Detroit teenager's phone. Semiconductor queens whose chips power every car rolling off the big three assembly lines. And fast food kings who defeated McDonald's in their home country and have now set their sights on conquering America, starting right here in Metro Detroit. But who are these Filipinos reshaping Detroit's economic landscape? What's life really like when your family name is synonymous with billions? And how did a $5.2 billion chicken empire decide that Sterling Heights, Michigan, was the perfect place to plant its American flag? Today, we're counting down the 10 most significant Filipino wealth connections to Detroit. We'll explore the empires they've built, check in on their Detroit footprint, and see how they're positioned to shape Motor City's future. From healthcare foundations to tech billionaires, from community builders to the family that turned a two-flavor ice cream shop into a global restaurant empire, each entry reveals another layer of this hidden Filipino influence in America's automotive capital. And the number one spot? That belongs to a family whose fortune is truly mind-boggling. A dynasty that defeated McDonald's, acquired Smashburger, and just opened their first Michigan location to lines stretching around the block. This is the story of the richest Filipino presence in Detroit. Let's begin the countdown. Kicking off our list at number 10, we're going back over a century to the very foundation of Filipino influence in Michigan. Before there were Filipino billionaires with Detroit connections, before there were fast food empires and semiconductor fortunes, there were the pensionados, the elite young Filipinos who traveled to Ann Arbor and planted the first seeds of what would eventually become a hidden wealth network stretching across the American Midwest. The year was 1900. Two young men from the Philippines, Santiago Arteaga of Manila and Juan Texan of Bulacan, arrived at the University of Michigan to study civil engineering. Both were 21 years old. Both were handpicked by a man named Dean C. Worcester, a University of Michigan alumnus who would go on to govern the Philippines under American colonial rule. Worcester had a message for the brightest minds in the Philippine Islands, and it was simple: the best go to the University of Michigan. 3 years later, the Pensionado Act of 1903 formalized this pipeline. The United States government would sponsor elite Filipino students to study at America's top universities, not out of charity, but to create a class of Western-educated leaders who could help govern the Philippine colony. These weren't ordinary students scraping together tuition money. These were the sons and daughters of Philippine aristocracy, sent across the Pacific to learn American governance, engineering, law, and commerce. The University of Michigan became a training ground for the future Filipino elite. Students who walked those Ann Arbor halls would return to the Philippines and build the nation's professional infrastructure. They would become politicians, judges, business leaders, and tycoons who shaped their country's economy for generations. One notable alumna stands out above the rest: Miriam Defensor Santiago, the firebrand Filipino senator and international judge who earned her doctorate from the University of Michigan and became one of the most powerful women in Philippine political history. While individual pensionado wealth is difficult to quantify on a balance sheet, this educational pipeline created something far more valuable: the Filipino professional class that would later produce the billionaires still to come on this list. The relationships forged in Michigan classrooms over a century ago laid invisible foundations for the economic connections that would follow. The pensionado legacy proves something important. Filipino ambition in Michigan isn't new. It's been building for over 100 years. At number 9, we have a collective force that's reshaping Detroit's healthcare landscape in ways most Michiganders never see: the Filipino nursing community, a workforce generating tens of millions of dollars in annual wages and quietly building the economic foundation for everything else on this list. Walk into any major Detroit hospital today, and you'll hear Tagalog in the hallways. Henry Ford Health System alone is recruiting up to 600 Filipino nurses through 2025. Trinity Health in Livonia employs over 100 international workers, many from the Philippines. Corewell Health is running active Filipino nurse recruitment programs across the region. This isn't a trickle of immigration. This is a tsunami of professional talent reshaping Motor City's healthcare infrastructure. The numbers tell a story of collective wealth accumulation. The average registered nurse in Michigan earns between $75,000 and $95,000 annually. Multiply that across hundreds of Filipino nurses working in Metro Detroit's hospital systems, and you're looking at a collective economic engine generating $45 to $60 million in annual wages, minimum. But the real wealth building happens beyond the paycheck. Filipino nurses in Detroit are purchasing homes in Sterling Heights and Southfield. They're opening businesses in their communities. They're sending remittances back to the Philippines. Filipino-Americans nationwide contribute an estimated $30 billion annually to the Philippine economy, while simultaneously building generational wealth in America. This dual economic engine makes the Filipino nursing community one of the most significant wealth-generating forces in Metro Detroit's immigrant population. Here's what makes this entry crucial for our countdown. When Jollibee's corporate executives scouted Michigan for their first location, they weren't just counting Filipino residents. They were looking for proof of purchasing power, evidence that a Filipino consumer base existed with money to spend. The healthcare community provided that evidence. Filipino nurses aren't just caregivers. They're community anchors, wealth builders, and the economic backbone that makes larger Filipino commercial ventures viable. At number 8, we have the organizational heart that holds it all together: the Philippine-American Community Center of Michigan, headquartered in Southfield, the infrastructure that allows Filipino wealth to take root and grow in Motor City. Every wealthy community needs institutions, banks, churches, cultural centers, networks of trust that help newcomers find their footing and help entrepreneurs find their customers. For Detroit's Filipinos, PACCM serves all these functions and more. The Filipino population in Metro Detroit numbers approximately 12,000 according to census estimates. That might sound modest compared to Filipino communities in California or Hawaii. But here's what makes Detroit different. This community is organized, connected, and punching far above its demographic weight. PACCM hosts cultural festivals and Filipino-American History Month celebrations that keep the diaspora connected across generations. But its real power lies in something less visible: the networking that happens when a Filipino nurse arrives from Manila and needs to find housing, or when a Filipino entrepreneur wants to open a restaurant and needs to find customers. This social infrastructure creates what economists call ethnic capital, the trust networks and shared knowledge that help immigrant communities build wealth faster than they could individually. It's why Filipino-owned businesses cluster in certain areas. It's why Jollibee chose Sterling Heights for their Michigan debut. That community density didn't happen by accident. Organizations like PACCM helped create it over decades of patient institution building. While PACCM itself operates as a nonprofit, its role in community building has enabled millions of dollars in Filipino-owned business activity throughout Metro Detroit. You can't quantify that on a corporate balance sheet, but you can see it on the streets of Sterling Heights, in the Filipino restaurants, the remittance centers, the businesses with Tagalog signs in their windows. The community builders aren't billionaires, but without them, the billionaires wouldn't have a market. And speaking of markets, the next entries take us into serious money territory, starting with local entrepreneurs who proved Filipino cuisine could thrive in Michigan, and a semiconductor queen so private that no verified photograph of her exists on the entire internet. At number 7, we have the entrepreneurs who proved the concept. The Filipino small business owners scattered throughout Metro Detroit who are building the middle class one lumpia roll at a time. Not all wealth comes with a billion-dollar price tag. Sometimes, the most important fortunes are the ones being built brick by brick, customer by customer, in bakeries and restaurants that most people outside the community will never hear about. Take Jonathan Peregrino and his business, JP Makes and Bakes, located on Woodward Avenue in Detroit. Jonathan isn't a billionaire. He's not going to appear on any Forbes list, but he's doing something that matters enormously for our countdown. He's proving that Filipino flavors can thrive in Michigan. Around Detroit, Peregrino has become known for his bright purple oob cookies, his oob brownies, and his oob rolls. Filipino confections that have developed a devoted following among customers who had never tasted uba before walking through his doors. As Peregrino himself puts it, he's doing Filipino flavors in a familiar format. That philosophy, meeting American consumers where they are while introducing them to something new, is exactly the strategy that billion-dollar Filipino food companies have used to conquer markets around the world. JP Makes and Bakes is Detroit's only Filipino bakery. Let that sink in for a moment. In a metropolitan area of over 4 million people, with a Filipino community numbering in the thousands, there is exactly one dedicated Filipino bakery. That's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of untapped potential. And Peregrino isn't alone. Scattered throughout Metro Detroit, you'll find dozens of Filipino-owned establishments operating beneath the radar, restaurants serving adobo and sinigang to homesick nurses after long hospital shifts, grocery stores stocking Filipino imports for families craving a taste of home, catering companies providing lumpia and pancit for every birthday party and graduation celebration in the community. Individually, these businesses might generate modest revenues. Collectively, they represent a small business ecosystem worth an estimated $5 to $10 million annually and growing every year. Here's why this matters for the billionaires still to come on our list. When Jollibee Foods Corporation, a company worth billions, decided to research the Detroit market for potential expansion, they weren't just looking at census data. They were looking for proof of concept. Could Filipino cuisine find an audience in Michigan? Were there entrepreneurs already succeeding with Filipino flavors? Businesses like JP Makes and Bakes provided that proof. They demonstrated that the market existed, that the appetite was real, and that Filipino food could cross over to mainstream American consumers. The local entrepreneurs may never make headlines, but they laid the groundwork for the billion-dollar players who would follow. They are the foundation upon which Filipino commercial empires are built, one ube cookie at a time. Now, we enter billionaire territory, and at number 6, we meet a woman so private, so deliberately invisible, that no verified photograph of her exists anywhere on the public internet. Yet her company's products flow through every major automaker in Detroit, embedded in the semiconductor systems that power modern vehicles. Meet Susan Ocampo. Net worth? $2.3 billion according to Forbes. Ranking? Number 18 on America's richest self-made women. And quite possibly the most mysterious billionaire you've never heard of. Susan Ocampo is a ghost in the business world. No Instagram account, no Facebook profile, no LinkedIn presence, not even a single verified photograph in circulation, despite running a publicly traded company worth over $10 billion. She has built one of the most successful semiconductor enterprises in America, while maintaining a level of privacy that borders on the impossible in our hyper-connected age. The Ocampo empire began in 1984, when Susan and her late husband John co-founded Sirenza Microdevices, a semiconductor supplier specializing in radio frequency components. They built that company from the ground up. No family money, no inheritance, pure entrepreneurial grit and technical expertise. In 2007, Sirenza sold to RF Microdevices for approximately $900 million. Most people would consider that a career-defining exit. For Susan Ocampo, it was just the beginning. Through GAAS Labs, a private investment firm she co-founded in 2008, and her substantial ownership stake in MACOM Technology Solutions, approximately 15% of the company, Ocampo has accumulated a fortune that places her among the wealthiest self-made women in America. MACOM trades on the NASDAQ under the ticker MTSI, and its market capitalization exceeds $10 billion. So, what does MACOM actually make? Radio frequency semiconductors, the specialized components that enable radar systems, wireless communications, and increasingly, the advanced driver assistance systems in modern vehicles. Every time a new car rolls off an assembly line in Detroit with adaptive cruise control, lane departure warning, or automatic emergency braking, there's a good chance MACOM semiconductors are involved somewhere in that technology stack. The 2021 chip shortage taught Detroit's automakers a brutal lesson about their dependence on semiconductor suppliers. Production lines went silent. Dealership lots sat empty. Billions of dollars in revenue evaporated because tiny chips weren't available. Companies like MACOM, and by extension, shareholders like Susan Ocampo, suddenly found themselves recognized as critical infrastructure for the entire automotive industry. Susan Ocampo graduated from Miriam College in the Philippines before building her American empire. Her husband John, who served as MACOM's chairman and took the company public in 2012, passed away in 2023. Together, they donated $25 million to Santa Clara University for STEM education, a gift reflecting their belief in creating the next generation of engineers and entrepreneurs. The semiconductor queen may live in Hawaii, far from the frozen streets of Detroit, but her products drive through Motor City every single day, embedded in the vehicles that define this region's economy. Her $2.3 billion fortune is built on components that most consumers will never see, never touch, never think about, yet cannot live without. We're halfway through our countdown, and the fortunes are already staggering. We've covered educational pipelines stretching back over a century, healthcare workers generating tens of millions in wages, community builders creating the infrastructure for Filipino success, local entrepreneurs proving the market exists, and a semiconductor billionaire whose invisible empire touches every car in Detroit. But the wealth and power we're about to encounter is on another level entirely. Breaking into our top 5, we'll meet a widow who took over a $2 billion food empire, a tech titan whose app is on millions of Detroit phones, and the family whose $5.2 billion chicken dynasty just planted its flag in Sterling Heights. Breaking into our top 5 is a name that represents Filipino-American business royalty, a woman who inherited a $2 billion food empire under the most tragic circumstances imaginable, and proved to the world that Filipino leadership could thrive at the highest levels of American corporate power. At number 5, we have Loida Nicholas Lewis. Her story isn't just remarkable by Filipino-American standards, it's remarkable by any standard. Loida was born in 1942 in Sorsogon City, a coastal town in the Philippines, where her father, Francisco Nicolas, ran businesses and taught his children that hard work and faith could overcome any obstacle. She absorbed those lessons deeply. At the University of the Philippines College of Law, Loida didn't just pass. She graduated 7th in her entire class in 1967. She passed the Philippine bar examination the following year. Then she did something no Asian woman had ever accomplished before. In 1974, Loida Nicholas passed the New York State bar examination without ever attending an American law school. She was the first Asian woman in history to achieve this. The accomplishment required her to prove that her Philippine legal education was equivalent to American standards, a battle she fought and won against an immigration system that doubted whether a Filipina could practice law in the United States. But Loida's greatest partnership began on a blind date in New York in 1968. That's when she met Reginald F. Lewis, a brilliant African-American lawyer with ambitions that matched her own. They married in Manila in 1969 and built a life together that would eventually reshape American business history. In 1987, Reginald Lewis engineered a $985 million leveraged buyout of Beatrice International Foods, creating TLC Beatrice International, the largest African-American owned company in American history. This wasn't a small regional operation. TLC Beatrice was a $2 billion multinational food conglomerate with operations across Europe and distribution networks stretching throughout America, including the Midwest. When grocery stores in Detroit stocked certain food products in the early 1990s, there was a reasonable chance TLC Beatrice had touched those supply chains. Then tragedy struck with devastating speed. In 1993, Reginald Lewis died suddenly of brain cancer at just 50 years old. He left behind a grieving widow, 2 young daughters, and a multinational corporation that industry observers expected to collapse without its visionary founder. Loida Nicholas Lewis didn't collapse. She stepped up. As chair and CEO of TLC Beatrice from 1994 to 2000, Loida made her philosophy clear from day one. Her first moves were symbolic but powerful. Sell the company jet, sell the limousines, move from the luxurious executive suite to a modest office. Focus on profitability, not prestige. It was the humble businesswoman's approach, learned from her father back in Sorsogon, applied to a billion-dollar enterprise. The strategy worked. When Loida liquidated TLC Beatrice in 1999 and 2000, she had maximized returns for stakeholders and cemented her legacy as one of the most successful Filipino-American business leaders in history. Today, at 82 years old, she chairs the Reginald F. Lewis Foundation, co-founded the National Federation of Filipino-American Associations, and continues championing Filipino causes around the world. The billion-dollar widow proved something the business world needed to see. Filipino women can run multinational corporations with the best of them. Her legacy extends far beyond balance sheets. It opened doors for every Filipino-American executive who followed. At number 4, we have a tech titan whose empire is built entirely on code, whose app lives on millions of Detroit phones, and whose Filipino heritage most users have no idea about. He's worth billions, yet maintains a monk-like calm that has become legendary in Silicon Valley's high-pressure culture. Meet Bobby Murphy. Net worth, $2.2 billion. Position, co-founder and chief technology officer of Snap Incorporated, and quite possibly the quietest billionaire in American technology. Robert Cornelius Murphy was born on July 19, 1988 in Berkeley, California. His father is Irish-American. His mother, Rosie Go, emigrated from the Philippines and worked for the state of California alongside his father. From that immigrant foundation, from a household where both parents held government jobs and hard work was the only path forward, Bobby Murphy would build one of the most influential social media platforms on earth. Murphy attended Catholic schools in Berkeley before enrolling at Stanford University to study mathematics and computational science. It was in the Kappa Sigma fraternity house at Stanford where Murphy met Evan Spiegel, a meeting that would generate billions of dollars and reshape how an entire generation communicates. In 2011, Murphy and Spiegel co-founded a disappearing image messaging application called Picaboo. The name soon changed to Snapchat. The rest is technology history written in real time on hundreds of millions of smartphones worldwide. What sets Bobby Murphy apart from his more flamboyant co-founder? His supernatural calm. David Kravitz, Snapchat's first employee, once told Forbes that he couldn't remember ever seeing Murphy upset. Not during funding crises, not during competitive threats, not during the pressure cooker environment of explosive startup growth. While Evan Spiegel became the public face of Snap, Murphy quietly built the technical infrastructure that makes everything work. The engineering, the architecture, the systems capable of handling billions of messages from users around the globe. When Snap went public in 2017, Murphy and Spiegel held over 45% of the company's stock and more than 70% of its voting power. Murphy was 26 years old, one of the youngest billionaires on the planet. Time magazine had already named him one of the 100 most influential people in the world back in 2014. The Detroit connection runs through every smartphone in the metropolitan area. Snapchat boasts over 400 million daily active users globally, with significant penetration in urban centers like Detroit. Every time a teenager in Sterling Heights sends a disappearing photo, every time a young professional watches a Discover story, every time a local business runs a Snapchat advertisement, Bobby Murphy's fortune grows incrementally larger. Detroit users contribute to the revenue streams that fuel his billions. Murphy has used his wealth to support Gold House, an organization advancing Asian and Pacific Islander leaders across industries, and has donated to Stanford's programs for first-generation college students. The tech titan may live in California, but his digital empire touches every smartphone in Motor City, generating wealth from attention spans measured in seconds. We've now met a widow who commanded a $2 billion food empire and a tech genius whose invisible platform extracts value from millions of Detroit users. But our top 3 entries operate on an entirely different scale. We're about to meet the visionary who turned 2 ice cream flavors into a $5.2 billion global dynasty, the family empire built on chicken and strategy, and the invasion that planted a Filipino flag in Sterling Heights that all of Detroit will soon recognize. We've arrived at the top 3, and now we meet the man whose vision transformed 2 ice cream flavors into a global restaurant empire worth billions. An empire that defeated McDonald's on their home turf and has now set its sights on conquering America, starting right here in Metro Detroit. At number 3, we have Tony Tan Caktiong. Net worth, $5.2 billion, according to Forbes. Founder and chairman of Jollibee Foods Corporation, and the man who proved that Filipino taste could triumph over the Golden Arches. The Tony Tan Caktiong story is the ultimate rags-to-riches tale of Filipino entrepreneurship. Born in 1953 in Fujian Province, China, Tony emigrated to the Philippines as a young child. His father ran a modest restaurant in Davao City. Nothing glamorous, just honest food served to working-class customers. From his father, Tony learned the fundamentals that would later build an empire: relentless customer service, uncompromising quality, and the understanding that good food creates loyalty no advertising budget can buy. In 1975, Tony and his siblings scraped together enough capital to open a Magnolia ice cream parlor in Cubao, Manila. Two flavors, a small storefront, dreams that seemed impossibly large for a family of Chinese Filipino immigrants with no connections and no corporate backing. When customers started asking for hot meals to accompany their ice cream, Tony didn't resist the market. He listened to it. By 1978, the ice cream parlor had transformed into something entirely new. Jollibee, a fast food restaurant serving Filipino-style fried chicken, sweet spaghetti with hot dog slices, and burgers seasoned for local palates. The smiling bee mascot that would become one of Asia's most recognized brand characters was born. Then the real test arrived. In 1981, McDonald's entered the Philippines with all the resources of the world's most successful fast food company behind them. Industry experts predicted Jollibee's immediate demise. How could a local chain, barely 3 years old, compete against a global juggernaut with billions in marketing power and decades of operational excellence? Tony Tan Cactiong had a secret weapon the experts didn't understand: Filipino taste. While McDonald's served standardized American fare optimized for consistency across continents, Jollibee offered something McDonald's couldn't replicate: food that captured Filipino flavor preferences precisely. Crispier, juicier chicken, sweeter spaghetti, rice instead of fries. By 1984, Jollibee had overtaken McDonald's in Philippine market share. They have never relinquished that lead in 4 decades of competition. Today, Jollibee Foods Corporation operates over 6,700 stores across 34 countries. The company owns 17 brands, including Smashburger, acquired for $210 million, and Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, purchased for $350 million. Tony Tan Cactiong sits atop a fast food empire generating billions in annual revenue. Our runner-up isn't one person, it's a dynasty. At number 2, we have the Tan family, the collective force behind the Jollibee empire, whose combined wealth and coordinated strategy have built one of Asia's most formidable business machines. Tony married Grace Tan, and together they raised 6 children: William, Erwin, Keith, Macon, Henry, and Jillian. This isn't a family waiting passively for inheritance checks. This is active dynasty construction, with each child groomed for leadership from kitchen floors to corporate boardrooms. The Tan children have been taught to visit Jollibee stores unannounced, taste the food, and speak directly with customers, behaviors their father has modeled throughout his career. Tony Tan Cactiong famously still shows up at restaurants without warning, checking quality and gathering feedback despite his billions. His children have learned that wealth without vigilance dissipates, that empires require constant attention, that the customer's experience matters more than the chairman's comfort. Beyond Jollibee, Tony co-chairs Double Dragon Corporation with Ed Garcia, building commercial real estate across the Philippines. The family's interests span food service, property development, and strategic investments designed to sustain wealth across generations. Combined family wealth through their Jollibee Foods Corporation stake, real estate holdings, and related investments exceeds $5 billion. The decision to enter Michigan wasn't made by corporate strategists in isolation. It was a family decision reflecting the Tan dynasty's conviction that the American Midwest represents the next frontier for Filipino fast food conquest. And now, the moment this entire countdown has been building toward. At number 1, we have the Jollibee invasion, the $5.2 billion empire that officially planted its flag in Metro Detroit on January 12, 2024, forever changing the Filipino wealth landscape of Motor City. On that freezing January morning, something unprecedented happened in Sterling Heights. Hundreds of Metro Detroiters lined up outside a fast food restaurant in bitter winter cold. Not for burgers, not for pizza, but for Filipino fried chicken. The location? 44,945 Woodridge Drive, a former Denny's transformed into Jollibee's first Michigan outpost. Drive-through, dine-in, carry-out, the full arsenal deployed. The first 100 customers received free Chicken Joy for an entire year. Local television stations covered the opening as a cultural phenomenon. Filipino-Americans who had driven hours from across the Midwest wept at finally having their comfort food within reach. This wasn't a soft launch or a market test. This was a statement of intent from a $5 billion corporation. Nick Bedell, Jollibee North America's marketing director, told Our Detroit magazine exactly what the company wants: expansion throughout the Detroit area. The North American goal is ambitious: 500 stores within 5 to 7 years. Currently operating 72 locations across 14 states, Jollibee views Michigan as the beachhead for Midwest conquest. The menu offers something Detroit has never tasted at scale: Chicken Joy, the hand-breaded fried chicken that defeated Colonel Sanders and Ronald McDonald in the Philippines. Jolly spaghetti with its sweet sauce, hot dog slices, and ham that the late Anthony Bourdain praised on CNN. Peach mango pie, a cult favorite spawning internet obsessions. Palabok Fiesta, traditional Filipino noodles rarely found in American fast food. For the first time in Detroit history, a Filipino billionaire family has made a direct, physical, brick-and-mortar investment in the city. The Jollibee Bee now competes for attention alongside the Ford Oval, the Chrysler Wing, and the General Motors logo. Filipino wealth has officially arrived in Motor City, not through invisible semiconductors or digital platforms, but through something you can taste, something your children will crave, something that will reshape the regional fast food landscape for decades. Tony Tan Caktiong's net worth stands at $5.2 billion. Jollibee Foods Corporation commands a multi-billion-dollar global footprint. Michigan investment, confirmed and expanding. This is by far the most significant Filipino wealth presence in Detroit history. The invasion has begun. The Bee has landed in Motor City. And the Tan family is just getting started. From pensionados studying civil engineering in Ann Arbor over a century ago, to a $5.2 billion chicken empire opening its doors in Sterling Heights, the Filipino journey in Detroit has been one of quiet accumulation, strategic positioning, and patient building. This countdown has revealed something remarkable. Filipino wealth touches Detroit in ways most Michiganders never see. The semiconductors in their cars may carry Susan Ocampo's fingerprints. The nurses caring for their elderly parents may have trained in Manila. The app their teenagers can't stop using was built by a half-Filipino tech genius. And now, the fried chicken they're about to discover was perfected by a family that outmaneuvered McDonald's on the global stage. Detroit has always been a city built by immigrants: Polish auto workers, Italian grocers, Arab entrepreneurs, Mexican laborers. Each wave has added to the city's economic tapestry. Now, Filipino capital is weaving itself into that pattern, and the scale is different this time. We're not talking about corner stores and family restaurants, though those matter too. We're talking about billion-dollar fortunes, multinational corporations, and strategic expansion into the American heartland. Tony Tan Caktiong's decision to plant Jollibee's flag in Sterling Heights isn't just a business move. It's a signal. Filipino wealth sees opportunity in Detroit. Filipino enterprise believes in the Midwest market, and Filipino families are willing to bet billions that America's heartland is ready for Filipino flavors. The total Filipino wealth touching Detroit, when you add up Susan Ocampo's semiconductor billions, Bobby Murphy's Snapchat fortune, Louisa Nicholas Lewis's business legacy, the Tan family's Jollibee empire, and the collective economic power of the Filipino healthcare and small business community, you're looking at over $10 billion in combined wealth with Detroit connections. Motor City met Manila, and Manila brought billions. The next time you drive down Hall Road in Sterling Heights and see that red bee mascot, remember what it represents. Not just fried chicken, not just fast food, but a $5.2 billion family fortune that chose Detroit, chose Michigan, chose to bet on this community's future. The richest Filipino family in Detroit isn't hiding in a mansion somewhere. They're serving Chicken Joy at a drive-through window, collecting data on what Michigan eats, and planning their next locations. The Filipino empire in Detroit is just getting started. The question is, are you paying attention? Let us know in the comments which entry surprised you most. And if this countdown opened your eyes to the hidden wealth networks reshaping American cities, hit that subscribe button. We've got more stories to tell.